Hello and welcome to episode 26 of the Hobby Hour. Last episode, we spent the whole time talking about Middle Earth. This time, we're going to do a big special or a big ramble on Warhammer the Old World and talking about the big summer of releases. But first, Dan, how are you? How's things?
Warm.
It is
As
warm, isn't it?
the entire world will probably be sick of hearing Brett whinge about the heat, and we'll try and tell you it's different, blah blah blah. But it sucks, and I don't like it. And if that makes us soft, fine. It sucks. I can't do any painting, and it's too hot to sleep. So
Yeah.
yay. But apart from that, it's not too bad. As touched on, we will discuss more in future at the end of the episode about our personal hobby. But I wouldn't expect much because it's been bloody hot and I ain't done much. So yeah, but
Yeah.
otherwise good. Self?
Yeah, good. Same sweatiness. I think it's like 32 in the UK at the moment, which isn't a lot for some parts of the world, but we don't have aircon in our homes, and we are an island with water, and that means cloud and humidity. It gets pretty hot, and I've been overseas in hot temperatures enough, and this always feels different. It's always like Florida rather than kind of nice Greek island dry heat sort of thing. But anyway, yeah, we will be covering all the normal hobby hour stuff towards the end. So we'll go through our hobby and talk about what we've been doing. So that's not missing from the show. We're just doing it at the other end. And we're going to be talking about all the old world stuff. We've had this plan for ages, haven't we, Dan? We've wanted to do this. So
Yeah.
Dan gets, we mentioned in the last show, but maybe some of you who don't like Middle Earth, if you didn't watch the last show and only watched the old world related ones, Dan is covered by the NDA I have. Dan gets PDFs of some of the books, not everything. Doesn't get miniatures and things, but he does have PDFs. So we've been talking about the Wood Elf Journal and the Beastman Journal and the Cathay Journal when they arrived, which has been really cool. So we've been talking a while, but because I do the reviews with the book, full books, and the format I do them, we've not formally put a video out to it. So we thought, well, we'll just cover it all in one. We knew this was all coming, so let's just have one big hobby hour podcast, and we just talk about it as the summer of releases, the big summer. I think it has been a pretty big summer for the game. Not only has it finished off the cycle of the first 9 books to have their arcane journals, he's added a brand new faction. We've got a match play guide, and we have an FAQ as well. So we thought, nice big conversation around the state of the game while touching on our favourite points from all those releases. So let's start talking about these. We're not going to go through it necessarily in a particular order, but we will take them a little bit in release order, I suppose. And I'm going to be asking Dan lots of questions because you know my thoughts on these books if you've watched this channel. Dan, let's talk about Wood Elves. And first of all, what were you? Do you have anything that really stands out for you from the book?
Well, let's get them out of the way, if I'm honest with you. You know my feelings on Wood Elves, and I'm sorry if I'm going to upset an awful lot of other people. I've never particularly found them exciting. I think they're high elves that eat mud, and I've never particularly been that bothered by them. However, the book is quite cool. The model line still doesn't excite me. The idea of playing them, particularly, admittedly, we'll come to later, the FAQ seems to have put the cat amongst the pigeons and how they may play.
Mm-hmm.
However, the idea of sneaky, tiny units with arrows and effectively almost not engaging with your opponent, that not my idea of fun to play with or against. So
Yeah.
they've always been on a little bit of a loser for me. But what I will say though is the quality that we've seen amongst all of the other arcane journals remains there. They have received no less attention to detail than any of the others. There may be some people who may say, "Oh, you're a fool" on that one. Maybe I'm not quite as invested. Maybe I haven't noticed some of the glaring omissions. You'll have to forgive me that one. But the overall quality of the book feels on par with others, which is fantastic. And I do find both of the Armies of Infamy quite interesting. I think one that encouraged an infantry focused army composition, and bearing in mind this is before match play or the FAQ, was certainly interesting. I think it wouldn't be a leap to assume that maybe it was written knowing what may come. I know again, people were saying, "Oh, you can't give them that much credit," but I'm going to go. I'm going to go with it. It's too warm to be miserable about it. Let's give them a bit of credit. But no, I mean all of the normal stuff in there is really cool. So all the background, etc., and again the sepia tone artwork, which actually I think looks a lot nicer than some of the original color plates.
Hmm.
If I'm completely honest with you, and actually, it's mod colored, so it's perfect for what else. But even the one where they was it the seventh edition army book? They recolored it, so it's almost grayscale with some spots of sort of goldy yellow
Yeah, I
colorway.
think so. I think so.
I'm just gonna. Oh no, there we go. Let's flip round. This one. I don't know if people can see that. No, they probably can't.
It's not really, no, it's
But
not really showing up.
no, no, that was completely pointless. But the point is, it's pretty cool, and it is
I think it was the
page
sixth ed book,
13.
wasn't it?
Page
I
13.
will. I may even remember to put that image up, page 30. I think it's the sixth ed book, wasn't it? It didn't have one in seventh, and then they had the eighth
That was
edition
it. Yeah.
book. Yeah.
The one that was around when I was playing seventh anyway. The sixth ed,
Yeah.
I think. It was late sixth ed, wasn't it? It was before the second of the dwarf books.
I think so. Yes, I think
Yeah.
so. I think so.
But it's very cool. It obviously adheres to the existing lore that they're building. It's nice seeing the world start to be shaped.
Hmm.
It ties in with some of the stuff from Bretonia and obviously the Beastman book that comes afterwards,
Yeah.
although everyone assumed was coming first.
They pretty much said it in an article, didn't they? In fact, they did say
Yeah.
it in an article. So, yeah,
Well, I mean, they showed Cromwell
yeah,
like a
ages
lot,
ago.
lot earlier. He was at
Yeah, that.
the one of the events in the States, wasn't it? They first showed him.
Hmm. Yeah,
Adepticon,
I think it.
maybe.
I think it might have been along with the Empire release, wasn't it, or the High Elf release, maybe around that time. But they definitely showed
Yeah,
that. It might have been the High Elf one when they showed off this one single miniature, and it was Cromwell well ahead of time. So we had him teased a long,
yeah,
long time ago. But yeah, they said it in one of the many almanac articles that they delayed Beastman and all of that stuff. So I think it's. I don't think we even need to pretend that it should have been the other way around because it's quite clearly said in the way Games Workshop does. They don't come out and say stuff directly. This has been delayed very often. They definitely like to keep a professional persona of vagueness, don't they, with things like that? But that was as direct as they get.
yeah. And one of the things I quite like from it is the Taliesin Force in particular. Again, it gets more options, so you get better versions of existing units from the
Hmm.
main army list. But what I'm enjoying seeing, and something I didn't expect, is there is a little bit of DIY to it. You saw it in the Warriors of Chaos book with the Huskarls and stuff for the Marauders and being able to use Marauder Chieftains, which technically in the line there isn't a model for. I mean, yes, AOS,
Hmm.
but they seem to have been given a little bit of license to say, do your own hobby, which I think is quite cool and isn't necessarily in line with some of the other stuff we've seen. You've seen little bits of it here and there. The Knoll Road Wardens,
Yes. Yeah.
those, yeah, that kind of thing. But there definitely seems to be a heavy lean into this one,
Yeah.
with the extra bits and pieces, which is cool. I mean, again, I haven't played against them, to be honest. I haven't done much gaming in the old world anyway, because I'm still busy not painting an army. Um, so I couldn't speak on the rules, or they seem quite characterful, whether they're any good or not. Couldn't tell you. I certainly couldn't tell you now the FAQ's out. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I've watched your video. A lot of the people here will have probably watched your video, but why don't you give them an overview, Steve, for those who haven't watched your individual breakdowns?
Yeah, well, what I won't do is do a review of it here. I
No.
will try and remember to pop a link in around each time we start talking about a particular book of my reviews, so that people can go and watch the Arcane Journal if they want to. And it's a full review that does the lore as well as the rules and things. But I'll give you my kind of overall thoughts on it. It's definitely a book that was criticised more than the Beastman, which was really, really liked, and probably a little bit more than the High Elves, which was a little bit Marmite for people. So the overall of the Wood Elves was a little bit meh from people. It depends how you look at it. I think most of the people would say that we're saying it from a rules point of view rather than from a total book point of view. I think it's a bit of a shame in some ways. It's definitely better now post FAQ. Like you mentioned, maybe they already knew the FAQ. It's really difficult to know. There's part of me that thinks they probably had most of these journals mostly written around at the same time, but I bet you they were finishing them off and changing them and adjusting them in order of release. And as the game had been out, and that suddenly that playtest group of a few people becomes the world who play the game, then you get a lot more data, don't you? A lot more feedback about how the game's working. You've seen that responded to in the FAQ properly, and I think in the match play guide as well, because all the things in there we'll come to later about the buffs to infantry. Whereas before that, without that knowledge, it did feel like the host of Taliesin, which I love, was very much here, this is an infantry-based force, take the infantry, but also, if I do, they're going to lose. And that's fine if you're playing casually or narratively. And I liked the list for that point of view. But yeah, again, if you're going to go to events and stuff, it wasn't likely to be as successful as others. Now, saying all of that, it's always important to remind people, and people probably get annoyed with me saying this, is this game isn't designed just with competitive or match play in mind. It's designed with a whole range of hobbying, right from pure narrative up to people who play match play. So you can't look at it through the sort of the lens of is how powerful it is it they failed in their writing, because it's just not what they set out to do. And also the arcane journals are the addendum to the grand armies, and I think the grand armies where we should view the balance. These are very much narrative themed armies. Now sometimes they're really competitive, mortuary cult, etc. That might not be as good anymore, but you get the idea. There's some really competitive ones out there, but a lot of these armies of infamy also aren't, and they are there purely for lore and fluffy reasons. And we also need to be mindful of that when we're reviewing these lists of what they're kind of designed to do. Sometimes it is just for fun and theme as well. They're not necessarily designed so that every single faction has 3 equally balanced lists available to them just on flavor. They're not going to be. And if you've played Games Workshop games for as long as we have, then they're never going to be. They've never done it before. They've never managed to. Such a big thing, and they try hard, I'm sure, to a certain extent, but also it's not their only goal is to balance. Saying all of that, I really like the Taliesin list. I did struggle to write it. Out of all of the things I've written lists for recently, I did struggle to get everything I wanted into it, and I hope that will change a little bit now. The biggest thing for me is I absolutely love the Guardians of Taliesin, the kind of the beefed up Eternal Guard. The problem for me is that in order to get them in your army, you need to take the Taliesin list. Great, fine, makes sense thematically, but it's a 1+ on Eternal Guard in your core. So you've got Eternal Guard, and then you've got those. And I said this on my review. They're not cheap, and I'm not saying they should be cheaper, but because of that stipulation that your 1+ on core is Eternal Guard, then I think that it forced your list into 2 big blocks, which took up too much of your points. And if you want to run it the way the theme leads towards, which is, you know, taking your BSB version from that, I can't remember his name now, flick back through. So we've got Araloth anyways, your hero, the Warden, sorry. So if you're taking your Warden as your BSB, which is your kind of somewhere in between your champion and your Lord level hero, and then you're taking Araloth as well, you spent nearly 800 points just on one unit and those 2 characters, and you just can't get anything else in. You end up finding that you've only got 15 shots or 20 shots, and they're Wood Elves. They probably should have other things in it as well. So that would be my only criticism, is I wouldn't have had the 1+ stipulation on Eternal Guard as core. I would have said that you can have those, but in brackets, unless you take a unit of the Guardians of Taliesin in special, that then takes that up, so you don't have to have both. So you can still have this really big block that's really fluffy, matches the theme, and you've got your Guardians of Taliesin, big block of those, but then you can still fit Clay Garden, you can still take Dryads and all those other things. I just found it was really hard to fit both in. Now the FAQ changes, you might want both. You might want a small block of Eternal Guard, and then a block of the Guardians of Taliesin, especially as they've got parry built in. You're not getting that, so you've got all your benefits there because they got Azrai spears as well. So you've got your spears now, which we see talk about the FAQ attacking in 3 ranks, and they've got parry. That unit suddenly becomes very good if you can squeeze them in, but they're not cheap. But other than that, I really like the book. I was just frustrated that I wanted to stick to the theme, but I was left running out of, and you should be running out of points. It shouldn't be easy list build. It should be an economy of choice. But that was the only criticism I had at all, is that it felt like the stipulation was steering you away from the most thematic part of it. And that by having those two big blocks, it looks good, but because they took up so many points, you just didn't have any bows left. You couldn't have anything else left in the army. But I need to rewrite that list now and see if I can find a list that makes them both work, because they look really, really strong now. I just still wish I could have one big block of them and then Glade Guard. Not saying stuff other than infantry, but just big blocks of Glade Guards and stuff. But really liked it. Do have a project that's kind of on hold a little bit at the moment, but do have a project for them. Have a battalion box waiting for me to finish off. People have seen the tree man I painted. But yeah, great book. It's a shame that it was seen a little bit negatively from a rules point of view. In honesty, it probably wasn't as strong as the Beastman was. Probably a little bit weaker than the High Elves were. And again, that took a little bit of a slating from its competitive nature, which tends to be so much where the conversation is, especially on the internet. And that's fine. People are allowed to be into competitive play, but that's definitely where the vocal discussion point is on the internet. And it's not about tournament gamers changing it. It's because ultimately people want to win games of Warhammer, and the players that only play at clubs are still copying net lists, and they always have done. This isn't a new thing. I've been doing it since 7th edition, 8th edition, 6th edition. It's just easier to get lists now because you just log on to Besco's Parents and see all the event lists, whereas before you had to hover around on the Warhammer forum and ask people and get lists shared there. But nothing's changed.
Or Warseer. Yeah,
nothing's changed
it's
though.
not for
Nothing's
me.
changed at all.
It's I think
find
it
it
does
interesting.
dominate the discourse.
Mm.
I find it interesting to a point, but it's the same tired argument often, which is what frustrates me. You you see it often, the FAQ. We'll come to this, but I follow a couple of the major Facebook groups, and you literally will see the same point being made by 15 different people within 2 hours of
Yeah,
each
yeah,
other, and you just think, can you not? Can
yeah,
you at least try and search and see if the subject's been brought up before, and you can go and add your comment to that? I'd like to look at people's painted miniatures, please.
yeah.
I
I
don't
mean,
want
it's
to.
not
I don't want to hear a
those
moan
groups
about
aren't like
frenzy.
that, are they? The internet loves drama. The internet loves negativity, and that's why you find that more reaction to negative reviews of things, pricing, and unfortunately a less than nice painted miniatures. When the reality is, and again, half the people being absolute idiots online are also always nice when you meet them in person as well. People just behave differently, and without dipping into other conversations, we've seen that more and more across the whole of society around the world at the moment, and the way discourse in general. So it's unsurprising that we see it in our wargaming things. But moving on from wood elves, then beasts, and I know you're a fan of the Beastman book. What are your
It's the best book.
overarching thoughts about that? It
It's
was
the best
very
book.
cool.
There is no competition. I refuse to hear anything from anyone else. I don't care about the rules. It is the best book
And if you
in
hadn't
terms of.
painted a whole 3 Warriors of Chaos, you could do a Beastman army, couldn't
Well, good enough.
you? You could. You could.
But no, I'm not going to. The thing with it is Warhammer. Beastmen are Warhammer.
Mm.
I don't care about. I mean, there's certain parts of it, Empire, etc., but Beastmen are quintessential in terms of the grim dark period of the lore. They nailed it. Beast Chaos book is the greatest Warhammer Armies book ever made, and this is a
Hmm.
very, very good homage to that. The artwork, the background fluff, the way it slots into the existing narrative, the way they've structured it. I mean, I don't particularly find either of the armies Infamy especially enticing, I'll say.
Hmm.
I've always found the idea of a Minotaur army just a bit, and the mixed list, obviously, the where you'd be able to take the mixed units, which is sort of more akin to the old school way of playing it. That's very
Yeah.
cool, but uh, it's just such a well written book. The artwork they've picked for it, I really like the characters. I mean, it's just everything about it, especially with the sepia tone they've applied to everything. Again, they've done it on all the books, but it works so well with this. It looks like
Yeah.
someone's, you know, some lonely scribe in a lonely tower that's had a run in with them in the Drakmor 20 years before has
Yeah.
penned it into the corner of a book because he can, he can hear noises in the nighttime. That is Warhammer. It's perfect.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't care about the rules whatsoever. I know there'll be people who do. Cool, knock yourself out. Apparently they're pretty good. However, um, it's just phenomenal. I love this book. I
Hmm.
was so excited about it. All I wanted to do was talk about it, but unfortunately, Middle Earth had other ideas, and
Yeah.
we're doing this now.
Yes.
And there's been a million and one other things. This is the thing I've been most excited about in terms of anything Games Workshop has released, probably in about 2 or 3 years.
Hmm.
In terms of actually just genuinely just absorbing myself in the hobby, picking up copies of the old Beast books, reading the old Storm of Chaos books, Darkness Rising, and all that cool
Hmm.
stuff. Even reading Gotcha Defeats Beast Slayer and some of the
Hmm.
short stories in the first one. No, I went right down the rabbit hole. Henry and I are both very excited about it, but I've refrained from doing an army because I really want to just paint a bloody army. But I can't wax lyrical enough about it. It's perfect for me, for who I am as a gamer, for the nostalgia I have for, in my opinion, a slightly more golden era of Warhammer Sixth. That was my
Yeah.
time. I was of a certain age, and this, that, and the other. It was that it all landed at the right. You're talking the latter stages of Mordheim and things like that.
Hmm.
It was just a time that was practically perfect for Warhammer, and this just reaches into it, grabs all the good bits, and just puts in a book. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't disagree. So not long before I received this, I reviewed the sixth edition book on Jordan Sorcery's channel as part
Yeah,
of the Games Workshop Books Club we do. And that was the first standalone Beast book. So the era you're talking
yeah,
about as well. And it was the era of grimdark when Warhammer became grimdark. All black and white, apart from the color pages for the painted miniatures. The rest all black and white throughout the book. Really grim, really dark. And I could almost apply my review to that to this book
yeah,
for similar reasons. That again, you've swapped black and white for sepia. It's got a lot of things that play into its favor compared to other arcane journals that I think made it easier. And that's not saying that the writers have had an easier job with it in some regards. I just think it works better for this shorter format. You
mm,
don't have the massive background. So this is what I said for the sixth edition book as well. You don't have the massive background that you get with the history of Empire in the fourth edition army book, the history of the elves, which you get in the fourth edition book, with this massive, huge timeline of all these different rulers and kings and princes, all these different things throughout the whole age of the world. You don't get that kind of level of detail with Beastman. You've got a few name characters, but mostly it's flavor and scene setting that is exactly the same in any era. You hear about the odd famous lord, but it's just not the same thing. So your word count is so much lower to tell the story for Beastman than it is to tell the story for High Elves.
yeah,
And I think it benefits from that because this doesn't feel like an army book that the others
no,
do. It doesn't feel like it's trimmed down. It feels like it can still tell enough of the full story for Beastman. And I appreciate there'll be Beastman fans out there that, well, they didn't have this from the previous books. Of course, they're going to have some stuff missing because it's half a size difference from the other books. But it means I think they can get that flavour across of Beastman. Whereas if you're coming to the old world for the first time and you think, well, those wood elves look nice, and you pick this book up and you want to know more about wood elves, then you almost have to go back to previous editions army books to actually learn the full history, because there's a little bit in the army book, there's a little bit in Forces of Fantasy, but really you go and pick up the fourth edition army book. That's where they started. The Nigel Stillman one,
well,
that one is that's where you really learn where the Warhammer we play today started. But with these, you could say, well, just read that. You'll know enough about Beastmen and that'll be fine.
Yeah,
Whereas with these, or definitely with High Elves and Empire, if you really want to know about their full history, you have to go back and look at stuff that technically has nothing to do with Warhammer, the old world. So I thought the book was great for that. I'm with you on the Armies of Infamy. They're fine. They didn't excite me in the same way. They're both good and I would play them. But I think, again, they suffer a little bit because of how good the Grand Army is. So built into the Grand Army, you've got different ways of running your army list depending on what you take as your general, and you get different options in your core and special, blah blah blah. So it kind of, you could almost do a beast list anyway, a monster mash list. Yes, it's not a
yeah,
minotaur list, but you could do a monster mash list. You could do a gore themed list anyway, or a magic themed. So all they could do is kind of enhance those a little bit more, and I think they did that quite well. But all the other armies of infamy, people were guessing what they were going to be, and most of the time having a pretty good guess. Whereas these,
yeah.
even the Beastman players on other YouTube channels, the big Beastman players, I don't really know because I feel like I could do most of what you wanted. But I thought they were fine. Loads of really good magic items and things in that. Having the
And
Herdstone,
great
Herdstone's just
models as well.
brilliant for the game, and made them very very good. And Crowmore's a good profile and really good
The
miniature
models,
as well.
and they brought the Praeton back and things like that. The only problem I
Yeah.
find with Beastmen for me is they're almost a victim of their own background. Because the coolest thing about
Hmm.
Beastmen is little encounters,
Yeah.
noises in the woods, in the dark. I mean, they brought about the end of the old world. It was them who had a fight with Arkell, and he got a bit of warpstone stuck in his eye, he got corrupted, and the next thing you know, it's the end of the old world. So it's the Beastman's fault. Um,
Always.
but which is cool as anything. And they sort of sit in the undercurrent of everything. You know, how many people, if they'd have made it to somewhere that weren't killed off on the road by beastmen, might have made a huge difference. It's nibbling at the edges of the lore of the old world, and I love that. Similar to Skaven, I think that's maybe why I like both of them
Hmm.
quite a lot in the lore,
Yeah.
because they're the shadows and the noises in the dark, and that is
Yes.
Warhammer. Warhammer
Yeah.
is not high fantasy; it is scary. It's supposed to be scary.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. For so many people, Warhammer is what it was with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which we've seen returning as well, which I won't go on a tangent with that too much, but exploring that and reviewing that recently, and we are back in a place when we are talking about the empire of man, humans,
Hmm.
mostly focused in the old world, and their biggest daily fear isn't orcs and goblins. Yes, there's goblins in the woods, but most of the orcs are down in the Badlands in the south. They've forgotten about Skaven or don't know about them enough. They're hidden away. Vampires have disappeared at this point in the narrative as well. Chaos are quiet at this point, and we know we're building to something soon. But at the moment, the average person in an Empire town or Bretonian town aren't thinking about chaos, gods even. But they are well aware of these guys in the woods if you live closer to the woods. If you live in the cities, again, you're not even thinking about these guys. So you've got that strip back to basics, low fantasy in some ways almost, which is weird for Warhammer because it can be both. But when you're talking about humans and you're talking about this, it's kind of relatively low fantasy in places at times, and these just fill that ideal bad guy, don't they? And you don't need loads. You don't. From a narrative point of view, when you're thinking about how much would it scare a village, just two or three of these guys are gonna rip
Yeah,
through some peasants in a village somewhere, and I love that kind of visceral, scary idea that you can have with Warhammer. Obviously, we're playing big battles in this game, but
mm.
I know what you're getting at. I think
That's why
it
they're
works
bang on
well.
for Mordheim. They're so good for Mordheim, because the idea that you can't traverse the woods, because even a couple of beasts might drag you off to the woods and cut you up and eat you. That's it's so Warhammer. It's so cool.
Yeah, yeah, agree completely. So that was a hit, and I think it was a hit from the whole community. People liked that book, and they really liked the magic items and things. So that was from a lore point of view, but also from the rules point of view. The overall kind of thoughts on it were positive, which was nice to see because it felt like High Elves were people like, oh, after Empire, which I think people liked but didn't like how competitive inventory weren't, and it's difficult for Empire. Again, they're improving now with the FAQ, And then High Elves people were really excited for, and again, I think the Armies of Infamy, one of them was, I think, pretty strong and even stronger now. And the one I like most was probably not strong, but I just didn't care because I love the theme. But you could just see there's starting to be that trend of the community thinking, oh, okay, well, where's our these lists? I think looking for one of the Armies of Infamy to bring some of the armies up to the top power level with the ones that were dominating the game. And that didn't really happen with Wood Elves, but it was nice to see with the Beastmen. Overall, people were pretty positive about it. But it's just a shame they were kind of compressed so close together because I don't think it gave either of them really time to kind of grow. Which brings us on to the next thing, because it, again, felt like it came so quickly, and a really positive thing. But Cathay, again, you just I'm never going to complain that these books have all come this summer. It's such a big summer. But it's also a shame that we've had kind of these feast of famine moments where these books haven't really been given time to kind of bed in and people explore before the next thing comes along. My prediction is this winter will be a cold winter for Warhammer the Old World with lots of heresy stuff around. So hopefully some of that will happen as people go back and delve into these again and they get their new appraisals now with the FAQ. But then we got this one, which was incredibly exciting. And it's I'm so glad you got the PDF, because I get an email that says you will shortly be receiving a PDF copy of this, blah blah blah, and that's the first time you know when it's going to be. And it was like, wow, this is coming early. People are already talking about it, maybe being a bit early, but at that point the community was still talking about August and things, and it was like, whoa, this is really coming early. but you can't talk to anyone about it. Yeah, we were obviously could talk about it a little bit earlier about it. But what were your initial thoughts with reading this one?
Oh, well, it's always interesting to see an existing army from the lore fleshed out somewhat. I mean, obviously there's other parts of the Warhammer world have yet to be really touched. Tilia in Nippon, all that kind of stuff. But Cathay have always been quite an interesting one in the lore. They were certainly built on when the Nagash books came out, because their interaction with the Nehekara, with because I forget the blooming city, Lamia, they were tied to. Which, without spoiling anything, although these books have been out for over a decade, so, essentially the weapons from Cathay caused Nagash to fail in his first attempt to take the entire country, which is pretty cool. At least their weapons, anyway. And it's even mentioned in there, obviously, which is pretty cool. So tying it together. It does feel like half a book, I will be honest. But I think we need to be realistic. We technically got half a book with the Grand Armies, and then there were, I don't really necessarily view this as an arcane journal. It's kind of like the Grand Army for these guys. And you can tell, even within the background, there are missing units. You've got essentially like handgunners and stuff. And even the characters can take hand pistols, can't they? They can take...
yeah.
So there's clearly going to be more to come. But what they've done with it so far, I think, is giving you enough to work on. The one thing I will say is as a painter, it is not particularly clear what you should be painting things. I.e., because there's the idea of doing it as an entire city doesn't work, because you've got different arms of the military and stuff like that, and then Jade Warriors always have Jade on them and things like that. For me, it's a little explosion in a paint factory. It's kind of why I preferred Orcs after third edition. You picked a clan, went with it. Same an Eldar, try and pick a craft world rather than, again, explosion in a paint factory. I like cohesion. I like painting armies. So I think I would have to possibly break the rules with Cathay in order to get an army out.
Yeah.
I would have to paint it as
there are no rules.
Yeah, but someone's bound to go.
But there is law. So it's up. I've got some points on this as well, but I'll come back to that when.
I like to be in tune with the law, and it feels like I'd have to pick between painting a nice cohesive army that looks right together, or being truly adherent to the lore, and that's slightly frustrating to me.
Hmm.
The fact that also it's not particularly well explained in the book. That is the only thing I'll say about the book that I didn't like.
I don't think it's
Um,
explained at all, but we'll come on.
well, it you can kind of gather a little bit from the pictures and stuff, but it's not explicit, and you don't know if necessarily they're painted it that way in order to present the miniatures to sell
Yeah,
them,
it's
or because
shown,
that's
but
how it should be.
it's not
Yeah,
explained.
yeah, it's look, but it's a show but not tell. It's very
Mhm.
much. But the artwork's cracking. Again, in terms of like the rules, I don't have much of an opinion on it, but it seems pretty reasonable to me. I know that
Mhm.
there's an awful lot of noise about them being too cheap. I couldn't tell you. I have nothing to say on the matter. And the models obviously are cracking. They're beautiful.
Mhm.
I have my favourites. The model on the Longma is
Yeah,
definitely up there. The Sentinel, and I think just the normal Jade Warriors. They're my favourites
they are
from
very cool.
all of it. Really pretty. And now I've seen some of the, obviously we've seen heavy metal of ago, but now I've seen some of the top end painters start painting
Mm.
these. Like Andy
Yeah, it's
Weddle's
been lovely.
painted a Jade Warrior recently.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I'm more interested in them than I thought I was going to be.
Hmm.
Cafe. Don't get me wrong. I've always thought, a new army, great for the game. It shows a lot of investment. The fact that everything's plastic, the faith they're showing in the game, it should reassure people about its long term future, all that kind of stuff. That's amazing, but it wasn't ever anything that I thought would interest me personally. I still don't
Yeah.
think I'll do an army, but I might pick up the odd piece to paint.
Hmm. Yeah. Makes sense. Definitely makes sense. Yeah. I mean, my first reaction, I suppose I'll comment a little bit on some of the things you said. My first reaction was, oh, look, I was expecting another unit maybe on what they'd shown us in the reveal. I thought there were, even if there wasn't a miniature at this stage, I wasn't necessarily
Mm.
expecting any more miniatures. I was expecting another unit. Um, so that did surprise me, but I also really understand why that hasn't happened. Um, and then I suppose the other thing, maybe not a unit as such. I'm still a little bit surprised that there wasn't a way of having a foot magic user as well. Um, it felt
Agreed.
like that's the profile I would have expected to see in there, without a miniature yet, and it'll annoy people, but with a resin on the way in the future. That would have been my guess before I received the book. But I kind of get it. I don't know this for certain. This is an assumption, but I think what you've got here was what's been planned for years, and this is the end of a cycle as such. Nearly, we've got another book coming. They've already told us, but I don't know whether that was planned in at the same time as this one or to what level. But I've got a feeling that the rules and what you've got here has been planned for a long time, nailed down. Maybe
Mm.
even with rules, maybe even before they finish these, the actual, if there were extra edits to those that relate to inventory and things, who knows? But I think it's been planned for a while, and that's was an investment, an agreed level of investment for new plastics before the game launched, is my assumption, my guess. And now they know the game's done really well. They're probably already working on loads and loads of stuff, but it's just not ready yet. And it was never going to
Yeah.
be ready straight away. And I think they may, I'll go back to what I think about this more in a minute, but I think they made a little bit of a mistake, in my opinion, just in their wording in the almanacs around what's coming with Arcane Journal 2 for Cathay. There's a couple of points on that. One, Arcane Journal, and you did this then, and you might well be right, but I think there's an assumption now, because these have all delivered something for a faction with two new army lists, that's what an Arcane Journal is. Arcane Journal might just be a 48-page supplement for Warhammer the Old World. Maybe Arcane Journal doesn't mean a a faction specific book with army lists in. So it just means this publication size.
Mm.
And you're right, that is a grand army. That is not an arcane journal with two
As
armies of
we
infamy.
understand it. Yeah.
Yeah. And my assumption then was we're going to get another one of these with two armies of infamy in. But we've now found out from recent almanacs that's not what we've got coming. We've got One of these they've described with an army of infamy in, which will allow you to take some Empire troops. And it talks more about expanding the lore and why Cathay is in the old world. Because a lot of the talk was why having Cathay, they're miles away of the other side of the world. It's all about the old world. Well, they're coming to the old world. And I think all the current theme and narrative, and we can see that if you read the lore in all of these books, they're all focused around the old world, and not always in normal locations. Even the Wood Elves are in the Laurel and not down in Avalon. So I think they've got got themselves into a corner with everyone assuming Arcane Journal. I might be wrong, maybe that's what they are, but assuming Arcane Journal means army book edition with 2 armies of infamy to start with. And then the wording they've used in that interview, which is presented in a article, is by not saying that they're calling it Arcane Journal 2, I think, even in the article. Why didn't they should have probably said there's another Arcane Journal coming, it's a campaign Arcane Journal. I don't know where it is one, but it bloody sounds like one. Because there's all this lore around what's going on with Cathay and the Empire and using Empire as allies. So for me, it sounds like that's what's going on with it, really. And I think just a slightly cleverer wording so people don't feel like, oh, we've got an Arcane Journal coming with no new models, because that's the headline, which I haven't mentioned. The headline is there's no new models coming with the next Arcane Journal. Doesn't sound like new profiles really either, at least not for Cathay. It sounds like a way of doing an army list that you can use Empire stuff for. Now, and it might be, like you mentioned, some of those cool kit bashy things. So it may well be a profile for a student of Cathay, where an Empire wizard who's lived in Cathay for a while, and you get to kit bash using some of the plastics with some of your bits. That would be really cool, and then you could have them in whatever army of infamy's there. So I'm really excited about the new book, but I think they announced it in a way that kind of just leaves themselves open to the usual internet criticism of, why aren't we getting any more units? Why have they half-assed it? Which is clearly not what they've done. Is that this was a huge investment, risky before they knew whether the game was going to be successful. And I think it's a really good book, which maybe is a little bit cheap on a couple of elements, but on the whole, good. I'll come back to that in a moment, because I'll let you respond to some of the stuff I'm saying.
I do wonder, though. I think it's earlier than maybe we should have got it.
Potentially.
I think it's earlier than we should have got it.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously, it's probably taken them 2.5, 3 years to develop this, to have miniatures on the table.
Yeah.
I think it's reasonably well known that that's the development cycle they work on. Obviously, you can see it in the main box sets for the main games. So
yeah,
a major faction release or whatever is usually about 3 years. So I reckon Kislev was supposed to be around before them. And I honestly think that so perhaps in order to make up for the fact they weren't coming, they have taken some decisions on Cathay in order to show faith and to release new stuff and generate excitement and stuff. That perhaps there is other stuff. You never know. They might be working on it now. They could be a model.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure
on someone's screen somewhere.
Yeah, well, they could be made even as well. They could be at that place, but they're just nowhere near ready for release. And
Goldfish will be selling it. No, it only says Goldfish will be selling them. But
what I mean is that they might not have packaging and stuff yet. But it wouldn't surprise me if they'd done the mold had been made and they'd had first stuff being worked on. Doesn't mean
that'll be online. By now. I don't want to be the cynic, but how much sprues and bits of boxes have already been leaked? Basically, if Iraq hasn't said it yet, chances are it's not been made yet. In terms of in the factory, because it'll be like the Heresy box. It'll be in the back of someone's frankly revolting car. It is. I don't think there would be.
I'm thinking well before that. I'm thinking like your original test level. I can imagine a world where the second what will now be the third book, but the one that has new miniatures in, whatever it happens to be, is written. Not finalized, and the miniatures are designed, and they probably already worked on even in their own 3D prints of them or something. I can see a
Oh,
world where that's happened. Doesn't
I'd
mean
be
it has,
surprised if it
but I
wasn't.
could see a world.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not
I'd be very
worried about
surprised if
that
it
at
wasn't.
all. Not in the slightest bit worried. I can imagine when this was finalised or near as damn it, and the miniatures were done, was okay. This is what we've got, and if Old World flops, then there isn't going to be a phase two. But I imagine that the go ahead, the green light for phase two happened months and months and months ago,
Well,
maybe even a full year ago or more, based on how well the launch went.
you wouldn't be
So
surprised if it was launch weekend and someone went, "Have you seen how much they've sold? Crack on."
yeah,
It,
yeah,
you'd have to be mad not to.
exactly,
It's. I
exactly.
mean, we were speaking to someone there, weren't we? And apparently, it was one of the biggest days they've ever had of any
Yeah,
stripe,
yeah,
without
yeah,
naming
yeah,
names or any.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So no concern at all about it. I know it's coming. I say I know it's coming. That's really bad phrasing. I don't. No one has told me. I don't know officially. I would bet a lot of money on it. Is coming. Things also can
Mm.
change. Something could happen that meant that things never see the light of day. But I'm very confident it's coming. And I wouldn't be surprised if the next Arcane Journal, which they've told us about, which is this Empire thing, which I'm really excited about. Actually, I love Empire. It's Marienburg setting. It's going to be really cool, and it suits the kind of thing I was already planning on doing. Was painting up some Marienburg 500 point Allied force to work with my cafe. So I'm excited about it. Would I have loved a foot wizard? Would I have loved I think it's alchemists and stuff that are in the
Mm.
Total War. That's what would I have loved the Jade Archers with crossbows, which I thought would come. If you've seen
Well,
my
there's got to
little
be a reason for the
short when I
repeated
did a
crossbow, hasn't there?
unboxing of the army, I there's the frames comes in three parts,
Yeah.
and if you snap off the halberd sprue, you can still build all the swordsmen. If you swap that halberd bit out and had a crossbow bit in, I'm pretty sure that the pose of the Jade Warriors could become crossbowmen as well. That might not be what they do, but it would be. You
Well,
can really see a world where that's happened.
we don't
So
have repeater crossbows in any of the armies. Obviously, Legacy Dark Elves, fair enough. But
mm,
they, if anyone thinks they wrote the main rulebook to account for them, I think they're kidding themselves.
yeah,
Um,
well, it's you
so
just got to look at the roster for Total War to have an idea of the
yeah,
other things. We've obviously been presented with a expeditionary force. It's even mentioned in the lore, and we know that this is about them going to the old world. So this is why all the peasants aren't there for now. This is why you've not got your peasant spearmen and all your cheaper troops that you start with if you play Total War. This is why you've got the Jade Warriors. So yeah, I would have expected crossbowmen. Even if we didn't get full peasants, I would have expected the different kinds of magic users, but I think they might be attached to different dragons more in different cities more. So
mm,
there's alchemists and there's something else as well, astromancers, I think, but they could potentially be your non-Shigengan wizards. I do wish there was a Shigengan on foot option, just so you could take a slightly cheaper option without the long, even if it's just from a balance point of view, because they are quite strong. And if you want two magic users, they're quite good. And that the special rules. One of them is about keeping your magicians within wizards within 6 inches of each other. You're probably not going to do that with a dragon and a longmire very often. It's not going to work. So the rules feel like they're set up for something like that as well. But yeah, it's none of that's super concerning for me. I'm looking forward to the next Arcane Journal. I just hopefully when it gets to the point of the release of the next Arcane Journal, that they do a really good job of explaining if it's a campaign one, which sounds like it is. Hopefully, they do a really good job of explaining that's what it is more, rather than selling it as a Cathay Arcane Journal that doesn't have new models. It may be that, but I think it's also a campaign book. But I think sometimes the language you use affects people's perceptions of it, and it just felt like a marketing slip. It doesn't change what the book is. The book is going to be lots more lore, expanding the Cathay lore, and sounds like an army of infamy where you can take Empire units. I love that. I love the sound of it. But what it isn't also is loads of new profiles for the roster that we're missing from Total War at the moment. So sometimes the language you use around it in your marketing can go a long way to how angry people get. Because if people think, oh, this is just an expansion on them, but we've got something bigger coming in the future, which we all, if we think about it objectively, we all know that's going to happen. But yeah. Anyway, going around in circles. But the little notes on the army list, I think it's fine actually. I think the dragon's probably a little bit too cheap. Maybe not as bad now with the changes of the rules, but comparing to others, I think it's dangerous comparing the Jade Warriors to Empire all the time. I did in my example because they're humans, but when you start saying these are overpowered because they cost this much and Empire State Troops cost this much, Empire State Troops, in my opinion, are overcosted, not these guys. I think that's the problem with always comparing stuff to Empire State Troops. I think they're the problem. I think they're overcosted by a point at least, maybe even more. And I think a lot of stuff is right in this game, but I think Empire State Troops was wrong. And you wouldn't have fixed inventory problems, but you may have seen a few more on the table by giving them strength through numbers. But aside from all of that, I think with its tiny limited roster that it is, actually they've got a lot of problems that they are not going to be able to deal with because of their lack of choices. So at the moment, it's not a broken book at all. If they did have a second Arcane Journal, adding another 5 or 6 units that were all equally as good, then combined, and then then maybe this would suddenly shoot straight to the top of the power level. But I think it's got its own problems at the moment. You've got such a limited roster with so many gaps in it. And you think, well, you can take, hopefully this new Arcane Journal, you'll be able to take some Empire troops to fill the gaps. So what do? Well, take some handgunners or something to fill out that missiles and crossbowmen. I don't know where you're going to put them in, because I got my battalion box, which I'm so lucky to have. It was so nice having a whole bloody army given to you. But I got my battalion box and the Sentinel and the Sky Lantern and the Gatekeepers, put them into an army list, added middling magic items, and it was that's 1,900 points. And to take it up to 2K, you just increase a couple of the unit sizes. And you don't even have to do that as well. If you wanted to go double Longmore or something, you don't need to increase your unit sizes. So I don't know what I would take out to put Empire troops and things in for a 2,000 point list at the moment. So people saying they're too cheap. I think when you look at them, comparing them with model on model, profile on profile, sometimes yes, but actually you run out of points really quickly. And I think the army is good, but it's also got lots of problems. And your cannons are good, but if you lose your cannon first turn to another cannon across the board, then that expensive cannon is not going to do that much for you. And you haven't got lots to do with it. You've got one flying level 3 now, maybe, not level 4 now that they've changed to magic. So you have to take 2 Longmas then to have that flying unit, or do you have to take a vanguarding set of Jade Lancers? But they probably work best as a bigger block and to keep charging. Now you can fight in 2 ranks with those. So there's lots of questions around what's the best way to build them, and if you build them in certain ways, then you do have gaps as well. So they're good, they're definitely good, but I don't think they're going to be as all conquering as people make out. And it's, as you always, you read rules in isolation sometimes, and you think, wow, that's good. But the reality is, when you get it on the table, they don't have as many tricks as some of the larger rosters out there have. But I think it's great. It's so good for the game. Been really exciting I'm right in the middle of making content for it all at the moment. We've got Longma tutorial coming up and our big army painting one very soon as well. So I say that this may well come out after those at the point of recording and we're having this conversation. Yeah, good. Really, really good. Right, let's take a 2-minute breather and we'll come back and we'll talk about the match play guide and the FAQ and what that's done to the mix of it all.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems and offer custom items to suit your club or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
So let me move on to this one, which you didn't get a PDF for. So we weren't able to discuss that one. And but this arrived later than the actual physical books arrived much closer to time before launch anyway. And then when I knew about this stuff, when we got the dates for that, we didn't know about this. And I only found out about when this was coming out when I was told I was physically getting the physical copy of this and the cards, and I'd already had the miniatures at that point. So it was like, oh my God, this is going on the same day. And I'll say right from the start, Dan, I don't know how you feel about it. I thought that was a bit of a shame.
Yeah,
I get
lost
it.
Some of the impact.
Yeah, I mean, from a selfish point of view as a content creator, I don't want it all I couldn't do reviews for these on the same day. YouTube algorithm can't handle it, so you have to wait a couple of days before you put it out. But aside from the first world problems of being a YouTuber, it felt like the biggest release for Warhammer since the launch. In terms of online talk, got lost in this and now the FAQ, which I think are incredible, important things for the game. And I get why it's happened, because my assumption is, and probably by the time you're watching this, it will have been announced. I don't know when, because I don't get the heresy stuff. But my assumption is heresy is about to land. The uptick in all the articles at the moment would suggest it's going to happen very soon. So my assumption is there's a real condensed release period at the moment, and they just needed to get it out. So I'm glad it's out, but there's a bit of me wishes that it came in September or something, and just let Cathay really settle in and people get excited about it. But you've seen reviews on it, so you've got an idea, the overview.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it as an overview?
Well, I think it's to touch on your point made about releasing at the same time and overshadowing and stuff. I think that more than any other thing shows where the busier, more vocal parts of the old world community are, i.e., going to rules and going to events. They're not so fussed about the new stuff, which is a shame to me. But your hobby, your way, do what we want. But I kind of wish that sometimes the other aspects of the hobby, new models and paint jobs and the lore and stuff, would get a bit more of an airing, or at least pushed a little more by Games Workshop.
Yeah.
Because the thing that does for me, I know I may offend a few people with this, I hate the release cycle of 40k and AOS. Every 3 months you get new rules and new cards, and as someone who paints armies slowly and doesn't game very often, the idea of maybe getting 1 or 2 games maybe out of something before it's defunct, it's not the game I signed up for and don't like it. And the amount of, they did the mini clear up previously, and then they've done this FAQ. And while I think it's necessary and it's needed, and we've got the match play guide, which again introduces new concepts and ways of playing the game, the fact that the pace of the rules are changing faster than the pace of the lore and the pace of the game annoys me.
Okay.
I don't necessarily think any part of the game is more important than the other. I don't suppose that painting is more important than gaming. I'm not going to say that. It is to me, and I'll die on that hill. But I get that. But I wish the discourse wasn't led so much by the competitive gaming scene. It does frustrate me. And rather than, obviously, when all the commentary came out, a lot of the reviews, and I didn't just watch yours actually on this one, I did watch a few of them, and it did just focus on, rather than being opportunities for new army compositions to do hobby, it was just a case of, I might have to take some infantry. That sucks, because I might have to do this. Oh, I hope all of the TOs just ignore it. I saw a bit of that, because I'd rather just play kill points and smash people. And I thought, that's a bit off. That's not what everyone's, some people are just saying, I'll risk it for a biscuit and take a smashy army anyway and just hammer people regardless.
Right.
And I just thought, I hope I don't ever play you. That's all I could think in my head. I mean, play your own game, play it your own way. But I think possibly some of the discourse has missed out on the opportunities that the match play guide, etc., is bringing. And that's sad. It makes me sad.
didn't see that personally. And I'll let you go back to the rest of it. I just want to comment now so I don't forget. I genuinely didn't see that from the reviews I watched and for some of the bigger content creators. I'll be honest with you, I was really nervous that it was going to get slated by some of the bigger names, because they do have a lot of power around, and I was really worried because I thought it was really good. And I thought that it before we knew the FAQ, I thought there was already some of the answers for getting more inventory back in the game. And for me, it's about Warhammer looking like it does in the pitches and seeing inventory battles and things.
Yeah.
And there's some really, it's called a match play guide, but it's packed full of really quite themey, narrative-y bits anyway. In order to do the match play stuff, they've added lots of really nice elements. But we'll come back to that in a moment. But so I didn't see that, and I was actually pleasantly surprised that some of the bigger content creators doing sort of reviews of it were genuinely really positive about it as well. And I was like, phew, good, because that's what when I read it, that's what I thought. I thought this is a positive thing, but I was really scared as someone who enjoys keeping an eye on the competitive scene, but mostly plays casually. But I was really scared that it would be seen as a negative by some of the competitive players. But I know what you mean. There are reviews like that out there, but I was actually quite encouraged that a lot of the vocal people who have a lot of power, run events, go to events, etc., were generally quite positive about it, and I thought that was good. Far more positive than they were about the Cathay release, maybe, and its power level and all those things. So I did get a slightly different reading than you on that one. But anyway, back to your thoughts on the book.
Yeah, I mean, I try to avoid as much as I can, to be honest. I don't even know why I'm in both the old world groups. I'm trying to retain my excitement by not being put off by people whinging, which is, that's the only problem. We're more connected, but some people probably shouldn't talk as much as they do. I'm trying to word that as diplomatically as possible. It's very easy to just see the negative because unfortunately, there is a chunk of it, especially at times. Trying to retain your hobby mojo while still remaining connected to the community, particularly online, can be very difficult, especially because my local scene isn't particularly hobby friendly.
Right, yeah.
So most of where my hobby lives is online,
Yes.
which is a shame. So that it makes it harder. I try and curate. I'll be honest. I mean, we discuss this otherwise, don't we? And I don't follow or watch a lot of the same videos you do. There's certain content makers out there I actively avoid because I don't agree with their stance on and their products for me. I don't consume it. End of.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to keep my circle small. I talk to you and I talk to a few others who are excited about the same things I'm excited about.
Yeah.
But obviously during the match play week and then since the FAQ as well. So we'll save talking about this 2 times over. A lot of the posts in these chats have been, I've seen some wild stuff in there. Proper tinfoil hat as well. It's good for a laugh, but you think if anyone was approaching this game, because a lot of people put off, and this is something we didn't talk about with Cathay. A lot of people put off playing old world because they're not interested in the nostalgia element of miniatures. They don't want to play with old metals, and that's fair enough. And I'm one of them. I'll be honest with you. The idea of a modern quality fantasy army like Cathay is, it's all plastic and all that kind of stuff, would attract individuals who have otherwise not been interested, and they go online and that's what they see. I'll be like, nah, you can keep that.
Yeah, it's been like that years over. Unfortunately, with all game systems, you saw it with Heresy, you see it with 40k, you see it with everything. Unfortunately, and sad to say, I used to say apart from Middle Earth, but then in the last 18 months or so, seems to be very much. I don't want to go down that tangent, but it's no worse than anything else, but it's a lot more normalized with the other gaming communities. It's lost its slightly different vibe that they had going on in those groups where people. So, but again, that's another topic. But
absolutely.
Again, go back to what I said earlier about people in online spaces and the discourse and all of those things.
So this is very different.
I don't read many rules discussions in those groups. To be honest with you, I just can't be bothered.
Oh no, but I'll try and think
healthier.
Through to find cool hobby, and it's just
look at the ones with pictures.
I wish you could
look
filter
at the ones with
for
pictures,
photos only.
yeah.
I really wish you could filter for just that in the groups. But no, I mean, I think overall the Match Play Guide's a fantastic thing. I don't have my copy yet. I will very soon. I like a lot of what it's trying to sort of introduce and suggest. I mean, I've always been a keen proponent of the Middle-earth ones. They've always been fantastic. It's very much cut from that cloth. Hugely. You can definitely see it.
Who'd have known? If only I'd been banging on about it, waving around Match Play Guides for a couple of years now on my videos saying, I think it's going to be like this, guys. I think it's going to be like this. But hey-oh.
Well, it's STS, isn't it?
It was a pretty safe guess. I'm not smart for saying it, but it's amazing how many people have got, wow, this is new. It's not really. Just they just did it in a different game system. The amount of comparisons actually where this isn't quite like it is in AOS and 40k. It's like, no, because it's different studio, different side of the business. But there's been a really good example that if you'd read about it or listened about it, you'd have seen this what might be what they did. But it works really well, doesn't it, with Middle Earth? Less people than I expected, but a few people were a little bit around that kind of don't like the initial pages. They see it as a bit sucky, tell them how to suck eggs and this is how you create an event and stuff. It's designed to be a coverall book where if you've never run an event before, you can look at it, or if you've never been to an event, you've got an idea of what to expect. Not every page in that book is going to be needed by everyone, especially experienced TOs. They will not need half the information that's in there. They'll just need the stuff around the actual scenarios and rules part itself. And I don't understand why they're probably willfully getting themselves wound up about things so they can get wound up about things, because you just read past the stuff you don't need.
It does. There is a part of the competitive community that naturally, and I don't think unfairly, dislikes the fact they're all tarred with a very ugly brush.
Mm-hmm.
About, winning at all costs, they're not friendly, this, that, and the other, and they're like, no, we are friendly, come and have games with us. Which I think is totally valid. Whereas I think actually Games Workshop turning around and saying this is what you should expect and everyone should be playing to win, but in the spirit of fairness and to be kind to your opponent and to be encouraging and inclusive and all that kind of stuff. That's only a positive thing. That only shows if it's a match play guide that's putting together events of, I wouldn't say competitive Warhammer, but structured match play that can be played competitively, to turn around and say that this is what you should expect and this is the way you should comport yourself at an event, would only reassure new players. So it would only cause more people to go. So I don't see what the problem is in making that readily available to new people.
Yeah, I think this book does that better than the main rule book, actually. There's what I think is a problematic sentence that they should have taken out of the main rule book about the no take backs bit. There's a bit early on about, and I get the idea of it behind it, but I don't think it's needed. And then this, you actually get a softer version, which doesn't make any sense. And the softer version is being collegiate in the way you play the game. And it's both players' responsibility to remember things and help the other player remind. So remember, you can dispel this. Remember that the remains in play is there. Remember, you dispel that first. You do this. Don't not mention things that you've remembered to your opponent's forgotten, because it will give you an advantage. And it states that very clearly, that's the way you should be playing games. And I think that's really good, because that absolutely is the way we should be playing games. And that sentence probably should be in the core rule book, rather than the no take backs line. I get what it's there, but it did feel like it was a little bit out of the old Raw Machine rules about the playing hard and stuff. It's not a huge issue, but I think it's out of place with the general vibe of games like that, and it probably wasn't ever meant to have the impact that it did. But it's nice to see the way it's talked about in there. But on the whole, I think when you actually get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's a really, really good layered tool for players to change the way scenarios are working. So you've still got the core of what a Warhammer is, which is lining up and trying to kill the opponent's army, and that's where you're going to get most of your victory points. But it's really, really nice to see how the standard 6 scenarios are better than the ones that are in the core rulebook if you want to play match play, and that all of the different combinations of objectives, the baggage, the different placements and layers, they can all be layered over and mixed and matched, and you can, God knows how many different combinations of scenario you can get depending on whether you put the objectives on and which secondaries you use. Thousands probably, or hundreds of different combinations of style of event you can have, or style of scenario, based on what secondary you use, what scenarios and what initial setup. So that's really good, and I think it's one of those that it's there for TOs to say, well, I don't like these bits, I don't like the hidden missions, so I won't use them, or I don't like this particular map, so I'm not going to use that map, I don't like this secondary, so I'm not going to use it. So that's really good. But it also gives so many different, this is the important thing, it gives so many different permutations that if you go to an event expecting any combination, then you're going to write a list that's going to be far less tailored, that's going to have more inventory in it, because you need inventory to score things now. And this is pre-FAQ, where inventory got better anyway. And I think he did a great job of starting to mix that meta idea of what the current net list thing is, and it was very non-offensive. It didn't really dramatically take away any of the things that the old school Warhammer only want to play kill points players like. That's still there. And it even kind of softened and refined things that some of the players didn't like. I've seen commentary of people that weren't necessarily a fan of the breakpoint thing, but are now coming around to it a little bit more, which I think is brilliant. We're used to that from Middle Earth. And well, guess what happened in real battles? Armies broke and run away. It's kind of that's what would happen. And it's really good, and none of it takes away on the table tactical play and positioning and things like this. Slightly tangentially related because of the FAQ, but I saw someone complaining in one of the groups the other day about, well, what's the point of the infantry changes? What's the point in charging with your infantry now, because you're better to receive a charge? But the point is, it means the game's about positioning and comboing and making sure that when you do charge, so that you're not at a disadvantage, charging that big block of spiky men with spears, that you combo charge with another unit at the side, or you position so you can charge their flank. This is what battles were like. So yes, that is a good thing. The side there with the long pointy things waiting for the charge are going to be in a stronger position unless you can do something to change that momentum, that moment. And that the rules now do that with the changes to the inventory rules. So I disagree completely. People are missing the point on it, but it does feel like with the FAQ and there's so many tools there that start to bring back infantry into the game, and with the changes to the rules anyway, the way the game works is so different to 8th edition, with the falling back in good order, and all the way the game works is very different now. I think you can have quite a inventory tactical game. It'll have its own flavour, and some things won't work as well, but I was really encouraged by it. And the narrative elements, the modelling elements, the making your objectives, making your baggage for your army, all those little fun modelling things you can do as well are really brilliant. I think they nailed that book really well.
Yeah, well, I can't get hold of a War Altar at the moment, because that's kind of what I'm thinking of for a baggage train for Chaos. But they're stupidly expensive to get hold of, so no.
Oh, at the moment. I'm already planning some bits for my my cafe, and some Warhammer World friendly objectives and some that aren't. I've actually got some cool 3D print stuff, some baggage and bits that I've been sent, and along with some tents for cafe as well. So that'll be coming in probably in a future video, because I think this will definitely before that video with those in. But I'm also making some objectives and things that are Warhammer World friendly as well, that don't include 3D printed tents and pots and pans and bits and stuff as well. The really weird the Wargames Atlantic have just announced or shown off a baggage set. I don't know if you've seen it, Dan. It's got tables and pots and pans and basically campware for your army. It'll be a plastic set. Perfect timing. Cool. So if you're not playing at Warhammer World and want to make stuff, that'll be great value and a really good thing to go and Google it, go and check it out. But yeah, really good. So I suppose it kind of tied in with that. Is unless you got any more comments you wanted to make about.
No. I do like the infantry changes though, and I also think that it makes infantry characters viable.
Yeah,
because no one really uses an infantry combat character now at the moment. It's very rare. Usually they've got a banner on them, or they got a wavy stick to fire.
And even now, BSBs you don't need as much now in this. There's not quite the rerolls, not quite as important now as Inspiring Presence. It's always been important, but now even with Cathay, you've seen with if you're tight on points, you're going to drop your BSB and you're going to stick your magistrate in a lantern, and you're going to use their Inspiring Presence more than you're going to worry about a BSB and your rerolls. So there's hopefully we'll see them come back a little bit now, especially now banners aren't given out quite as much. But which is FAQ time, so we're not going to go through the FAQ.
No.
That's something that we try not to do anyway on our podcast, because it's super dry for me, and people will listen to me talk about it. But overarching thoughts on it, Dan?
I still don't know really. It's great. It's really, really good. It's made some really positive changes. I don't know the game well enough to speak with any real degree of authority on this. Some of the things, the way I first read it, I had got the wrong end of the stick. Initially, I got quite excited because I thought the changes to the dragons meant that you couldn't put a sorcerer on it for chaos. Actually, yes, you can. Just means you can put it on aspiring champions. And when I thought there was less, now you can actually take more.
Yeah.
If you can afford the points. So I don't know much more to say than that because obviously I don't really understand it properly. It's going to take some proper reading. Obviously it dropped a week ago. I've had life stuff to do in that time. I've not given it more than a cursory look. I checked the Chaos Warrior bits and pieces. Doesn't in any way, shape, or form really affect the army that I built at all.
Yeah.
But then again, my army wasn't particularly what anyone would consider competitive anyway. It's just stuff I missed to make it look nice. So it is what it is. And I've not played enough games. So I am in the dubious position, and potentially positive position, where I don't have to unlearn anything because I haven't had enough time to really play it enough to learn it
That's fair enough.
So that's a Brucey.
Fair enough. Something we didn't mention with the match play guide, which is quite important, I think, as a context thing, is I think they were quite light on comp. So obviously, one of the comps, could we skip past that a bit? And my fault there, but one of the comps was a non-comp, and then I think the other two, I'd like to see together.
Yeah, stack them.
To stack together. So if we assume things are stacked together, it wasn't quite as restricted as some people would like in some ways, and I don't mind that because I quite like GW to go light on that, knowing that then events will go and add their own comp, and I think they still should. I like different events doing different things because it gives you variety. I prefer to have that. It's worked in all the previous editions. I don't want one single version. I don't want to see a definitive version like we have for 40k or Age of Sigmar that everyone pretty much plays the same thing. I don't mind something being generally the same, but I quite like to see a little bit of subtle changes here or there. And I say, oh, look at this event. We are limited to this. Oh, my God, they've limited to 40% on characters, not 50. So that kind of stuff's cool. And I look forward to seeing it. So I quite like the fact that they've given a really nice sort of base level. I do hope that most events combine the two. And I know that when I will write lists, I will probably keep both the combined arms and the grand melee things in mind, to try and make sure my armies stick to both of those things. Just generally the principle I would write, especially if I'm playing what I like to call casual match play. I don't expect it to take off, but I think it's a really good way of describing it, that most of the games we play, so if we were meeting up at Warhammer World for a game and we weren't doing some organised narrative thing, we would pick a points to match game, which is what match play is. And we probably wanted to be relatively balanced if we could, so that we both have a nice time and have a good game. And this is why I think that this works well, because it doesn't mean you have to go to an event to play match play. And it's what most people play week in, week out at their club, is a way of playing the game so that both players have got a chance of winning, but they want to have fun. I think the FAQ adjusts it in a way that hopefully we'll see those armies looking even more like games of Warhammer that we remember from the past, along with the match play guide. But you don't necessarily need to go super heavy comp on it. And I'd like to design an army that would give my opponent a good game in a friendly, casual match play setting. So for me, keeping my characters under 500 points or units under 500 points is the kind of thing I'd naturally do anyway. Like otherwise, I'd start feeling like, is this a negative play experience? And do I want to take a big Chaos Lord on Dragon that was 600-700 points? Yeah, that's cool, absolutely. But I would probably think, should I save that for a 3,000 point game or something? That's just the way. I'm not saying you're wrong if you play it differently, but that's just the way mind works on it. So those comp changes in the match play guide for me fall into the kind of the way I would naturally feel comfortable writing lists anyway. I always worry, think, is that a bit too strong? And generally when I'm thinking that, it's not at all. Someone else is going to come along with something much stronger. To the FAQ, there's so much, we're not going to cover it here, but overall, there were some really good buffs to infantry and the way they work. Some special rules that help keep them alive a little bit longer, fighting in extra ranks. We've got, which is really beneficial to spears. So infantry are back, and magic's been a little bit harder to cast spells. Our casting levels have gone up a little bit, but also you've got a bit of a boost for dispelling, and it means now that level 1s and level 3s have got a point as well. You might actually point in taking them, and to the point now, because of the way it works. They completely changed the system of how you cast spells, in how you get your bonus. Sorry, I'd say level 3s, you might start to see them a lot more than level 4s in some cases now as well. And hopefully those points will be spent on inventory. Nice army buffs as well from some of the armies that were struggling. So your forces of fantasy starts with dwarves getting a bit of a debuff on a lot of things, but that's probably because magic's got harder, so you got to make sure suddenly they don't, without having any magic, I think, become the big magic shooter. But really nice to see just some really sensible things like hammers getting Gromwell armor when they should have had it to start with, probably. Troll hammer torpedo being nerfed a bit, not because it was game breaking, but it was better than cannon. So why would it doesn't make any sense for it to be? It was just too good for the cost of it and what it did and how easy it was to put in your army. And then little things like the real big things, I think, for Empire, when you start seeing that the general of the Empire and the captain, their leadership goes up, which is really cool to see. Maybe we start seeing them a little bit more running, leading armies. Empire state troops get horde, which is, again, and veteran state troops get horde. Great swords, strength goes up to 4, so suddenly they're going to be sent strength 6 with a great, brilliant. They can actually hurt stuff now.
2 ranks.
Yeah, exactly. So suddenly all of that, those buffs, don't get me wrong, it's still all relative. I'd have loved to have seen a points reduction as well, but they're clearly staying away from invalidating that kind of level. And I can understand that, and I respect that. We'll have to wait for a second edition probably before those kind of levels of things are reevaluated. But it's just been stuff like that really benefits. And there have been the odd points change, so they've put Pegasus up, Royal Pegasus and Pegasus Knights have gone up in cost as well. A little bit of change to way skirmishers can charge, so you need enough of the unit to be able to have line of sight of charges. That helps you out with your skirmishing. Pegasus Knights just been able to zoom all over the place and charge from any angle.
They can't take lance anymore either.
No, and they can't take lance formation. So there's just little subtle changes that are being quite clever, because people were talking about you need to change the whole nature of the skirmishing rules, but actually just one subtle change about how they charge, and then upping the points on them. Suddenly they're still good, but they're not as ridiculously good that you're always going to see 2, maybe 3 units of them in competitive lists. Things like the Falcon Horn is the one used once now. We've seen that's the anti-fly for your Bretts. We've seen similar items in the last couple of Arcane Journals, and that's bringing that in line with those now. So again, so good. It's just, there's some really good changes. Not everything's going to be perfect, but again, it's been really well received from the people I would be concerned that, and the people that know a lot, to be honest about it, play a lot of tournament games and do know the rules very well. Again, there'll be bits that are questioned, but on the whole, from the commentators, I think it's been quite well received. There's obviously people in the groups that don't always, but less worried about that, I suppose. So I think as a release of something to re-energize the game and try to deal with some of the perceived problems, and I think those perceptions weren't wrong, that inventory weren't right in the game, and the match play guide and the FAQ has gone a long way to make inventory a lot better. They're definitely back. I don't think they've fully nerfed dragons, but you can definitely comp them to a point where people aren't always taking them, and there's a real question now. What is it worth? It's not just an auto choice to take multiples of these things anymore. So again, a new meta will form.
20 points.
Yeah, I think so. So
no Ogre Blade on them anymore. It's 75 points.
Exactly, that's gone up. Certainly needed to, because everyone was taking it. When everyone's taking the item in the list, you just generally, it tells you that it's probably too good, or there aren't enough alternative options, one or the two. I just think overall, this is a really good place for us to be as a game at this stage, but it will take 2 months for people to start breaking it again, and bits will break again, and bits probably already are broken, and there will be mistakes. And you're always going to have that with a game with a rule book that thick, with that many words in it, and all these different things, that some kind of attempt at balance of a game that's not new really. We can say it's a new game all you want, but it's essentially ninth edition fantasy, and the army lists are all evolved from 8th edition army lists. So it's a very old game that's slowly changed over years, and I think we're in a much better place with it for balance on the table, away from just big behemoth monsters and things now. We're going to see more inventory, which is I'm happy with, and then all of the minute details and adjustments within that will be and can be argued out between the players that know a lot more about the rules than I do and play a lot more events and stuff, and that's probably for them, and that's where they'll get their most enjoyment. But as a broad stroke, I think it's such a positive thing for the game alongside the match play guide. I just think it's really good. I'm really looking forward to see how it develops now over the rest of this year, and where we are at Christmas time, and we'll probably record a show at the end of the year, I'm sure. Are we still feeling as positive about it all? Hopefully we are. So I made a note earlier because I forgot. I promised to talk about something and I didn't. When you were talking about Cathay, we go back to Cathay, and you were talking about paint schemes not being in the book, or not knowing what to paint. And as someone who had these miniatures and was thinking a lot of these, starting to paint them before half those almanac articles are out, most of the information about painting those miniatures came from the interviews with the painters and the designers and things, and the little snippets of lore. So I am with you. We are missing. I didn't expect a uniforms and heraldry book. Didn't feel like we're in that era or budgets for SDS to bring out that kind of book. But it's not a criticism. I'm just saying I would have really loved to have seen some kind of article that had some. These are some of the colour schemes that you might see for different provinces, and just let people. Yes, the studio army is Nangao, northern provinces, but give us some official alternatives, because they will come, but pay someone to come up with some, so that
given
other
it's
people
a brand new army.
Yeah, just give people who want to go and paint something different. Because I don't know, some of the stuff I've done it isn't going to be right. So my J Warriors have got green, but I haven't put red on them because red I think's related to Nangao. I've left them just green, partly because I didn't want the red and the green on there, but also I wanted to leave them a little bit more generic. So as it stands, they might be able to be used as any J Warriors for any province. But that's only based on a few lines from an interview article, an almanac. So I would have liked it. It's not a complaint point, but I would have loved something like that for us more lore-based people. Of course, we can just paint them however we want and go wherever we want. And it actually says that, I think, in the same paragraph, but they mention it in the article I'm thinking about. But there's a couple of little things like that. You get the beautiful decal sheets. I'm going to say I really annoyed someone. I'm going to assume probably from the other side of the pond by saying decals. They correct me and say it's decals. Well, maybe in your part of the world. I'm going to say decals.
An aluminium.
But it just blows my mind that people don't understand pronunciation and regional dialect and things. Anyway, you get these beautiful sheets, and some of them are labelled. Like, so you got the House of Cog and Smoke, but what are they? And there isn't necessarily, that could have been in that article. So what I think the House of Smoke and Flame is what we're seeing with the studio paint job with the red and the blue for the cannons. I've got that in mind, but I've got a little bit more sort of beige and stuff coming through as well, just because I wanted to change it slightly. But yeah, I'd have loved, because my questions are, so does it's House of Smoke and Flame, to make the cannons, do they wear that in every army from every province, or is it I just want those kind of questions answered. Really minor thing, and it's the kind of where my brain goes rather than rules and FAQ. But I'd have loved an article that just showed 2 or 3 different alternative paint schemes and said that in the southern province or the eastern province they use this. They tend to be in this colour more. They tend to be in that, just so that people who want to go for a different province. Because let's face it, we're going to get 2 more dragons, aren't we? They're on the map. It must have a plan for it at some point. There's lots more dragons that aren't on that map. So you got the impression, and the way the rules are written, they're written dragons plural, and it's a separate pages for how the dragons work. It's basically set up for at least 1 more dragon release. So it would have been really nice to treat them a bit like Empire and say, oh, this is what this province is like. This is what this province is like. Minor thing, love to see it. And it may well be that those colour schemes are born from other people's colour schemes. Might well see whether it's a Notley, because he does all of his different paint schemes, doesn't he, for his contrast. Or maybe he will do some and they'll get named as something, and that will be where they start, just like Peachy did with his Ventrillian Nobles, and come up with something that end up being in the lore, which is really cool. I like that it happens organically like that. But yeah, if they have schemes, I wish they would have shared a couple more with us, just so you could paint alternatives and not go, I'm going to go with an all yellow theme, paint it all, and then go, oh, that doesn't quite match the lore. I think one of the comments, it's like a throwaway line when they're talking about Evolving, was about they're not using much white. I can't remember if it's related to China influence or Cathay, but white being a sign of death or something like that.
Yeah.
You don't know. You imagine doing a whole army, I want to go a white scheme, and then you get the lore that says, but they'd never use white.
Yeah, but
it doesn't matter. But yeah, I just wanted to make a point on that, because you mentioned it, and I agree. I was wishing there was an article, or a White Dwarf article. Can you imagine that with a few different color schemes and stuff? Anyway, I'll if they want me to do it, I'll do it. Not that they're going to ask me, but if they want me to come up with some color schemes and do an article, I'd love to. But anyway, we're coming to the end of this narrative. I think the state of the game is extremely strong now with that. I think what I'm assuming is the next Arcane Journal, which will be the cafe in the old world thing, kind of brings them into that current story arc. And there's clearly more planned for the future. I expect it to go a bit quieter after that. Wouldn't be surprised if we kind of got the odd miniature release or something. Genuinely don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. And I also don't mind. I think the game needs some time to breathe now and settle down with all this stuff. Let people play it. And then hopefully next year it will start picking up with more releases and stuff again. But I won't be sad if we only get one more Arcane Journal this year and it's that second Cathay one. If there's more, brilliant, but I won't be sad, and I definitely won't be worried about the game if we don't see anything else sort of big release wise until 2026, because it feels like we've come to the end of a planned cycle, and now they're probably working really hard at all the stuff that they've now been allowed to do with slightly increased budget on it, because it's all been a success, which is hats off to the team behind it, because they've done an amazing job, and it's been released far quicker and far better than I thought it might be, especially that point when we found out that they were only releasing 2 factions at launch and we were going to have to wait. At the same time, we found out that the legacy factions were going to be legacy. There was concerns then, and I was worried that people would go off and not buy the miniatures and give up because they couldn't play the armies they wanted to. That hasn't quite materialized. Most people seem to be using official miniatures. Don't mind if they're not, but it doesn't seem to be a game that's fueled just by 3D prints. Doesn't seem to be any different to other games, really. So it feels like it couldn't have gone much better in that sense. I'm still really happy about it. Last point, and then I'll let you talk legacies. I was really confident we were definitely going to see them. I'm not so sure now. My gut tells me that we kind of all talked ourselves into believing that they will come back because it's logical. I still think there's a good chance they will, but I just would be surprised if that's for a new edition. I think that's a new edition thing, and then maybe not all of them either. And I think there's more going on behind the scenes than we expected, and the success doesn't necessarily mean that we will see them all. It feels like Dark Elves are just ready to go as soon as New Daughters of Cain come out,
and
but
Ogres.
And Ogres would make sense because of the location of Cathay. But remember, Cathay's being brought to the old world.
But it's also they're sandwiched between Cathay and the Steppes Chaos.
Yeah. And
so
and maybe Kislev, if it has been delayed, is part of that as well. Because one of the land sort of journeys that Cathay may make to the old world would be through Kislev and that way as well. So maybe there's some issues around that, which brings me more to that kind of maybe slightly tinfoil hat theory that this second Cathay Arcane Journal may be one that wasn't planned when the game was launched in quite the same way, and maybe that's an adjustment as a way of adjusting to how we tell the story in the meantime. I might be wrong, it might have been planned all along, but it does feel odd to do one in that way, and I hope they do more campaign ones. But I hope Legacy, and I'm still confident that we will see something. I don't think that's it, they've all gone. I think some will return, but we may find that it's still more likely that we get vampire counts through the back door through a Vampire Coast than we do through kind of vampire counts coming back. I think some are more likely than others, but I just don't get the impression now we're suddenly going to see all those. I'd love to be proved wrong, but it feels like they're going to
seem the most reasonable. They're already talked about as much as they got his name wrong. Bloody malaria.
Well, you know my theory on them, that they were originally penciled in as the 10th faction. But
they
that's
have absolutely no identity in AOS anymore, especially since they've redone City of Sigmar. So I don't actually understand why they're holding on to them so hard, to be honest with you. Other than
it's got to be Daughters of Cain, isn't it? It's got to be Daughters of Cain.
But then you just go with the Black Fleet, because there was a long time when Hellebron and co were at odds with the southern cities. So you just send out the arcs, even if you based it around the Corsairs. It's totally doable.
You could do it. I wonder how the community would respond to what would be non-legacy, but a reduced faction. Because right now, as a legacy faction, you've obviously got the whole Dark Elf list as it was before. And one thing that they haven't done with any of the official Grand Armies is take away stuff that was really there in It's not much, the odd thing, like the Luminarch and stuff for the Empire, but most stuff is there if it was era appropriate. And taking away all Witch Elf type stuff is quite a big call. So I'd rather they didn't do that if it meant waiting longer and waiting for AOS to update Daughters of Cain, so that there's none of those miniatures are required for the old miniatures required, and then surely you can do it.
You could use the older Witch Elves, and there's still some at Harganeth, isn't there? So
you could. I hope they come back. I hope they, even if it's via sort of new campaign stories being told, or things get brought back. But I don't know. I don't think there's a big plan to suddenly bring them all back, and I probably got less confident from that over time, because they have a plan and they're focusing on the new stuff they can do and are allowed to do.
There's too many metal minis, I think, for them as well. Shades, Bolt Thrower, most of the characters.
We don't know all those molds survived either. And we talked about this, but we do know through conversations. I'll say conversations I have had with people who do know that some miniatures that have come back were because the molds were maybe found and had to be rescued. Some miniatures they just don't have molds for anymore. So not everything that existed before is back for reasons that people would think it was, because some they would have loved to have, but the masters and the molds don't exist anymore. And other things they found by surprise. So sometimes why have they brought this back and not this, but sometimes it's just a purely practical reason of they can't. It's gone. It exists only to history. I would love now to see Manan's blades come back, and in this future, in this next if those molds existed, is whether they want to do resin units, which is very different to what they've been doing with resin characters. But I suppose it's upgrades, isn't it? But again, I was surprised they weren't in the Empire book, especially with all the talk around Marienburg, and they're even name dropped in the lore. We've got a second chance now, haven't we, with this next Arcane Journal of them maybe turning up if Cathay are allying with Marienburg. Can you imagine if that was one of the units you could take as an ally? So you get around the missile troops by taking Ironsides or something. That would be really cool. But again, wish listing more than any.
If I could get Chaos Trolls out of that as well, I'd be quite pleased. But
that might be a little bit harder to squeeze in that theme of book, but you never know.
Well, no, but I mean, eventually, there's a whole lot of stuff out of that Tamarkan book I'd like to see.
Yeah. Lots of cool stuff. But yeah, I think a legacy's a potential, but I don't know if there's a plan for this edition for it. And we don't know what the edition's going to be. Is it going to be 3 years straight into a 3-year cycle? I hope not. I hope it's going to be more like
4 or 5
Heresy when it started, because Heresy started slow through Black Books, and then we had the first edition, which was really a 1.5, wasn't it? Because it was compiling it into the Age of Darkness Red Books. And then you had the proper second edition box release, and now we're just about to have a third. So my hope was that we don't go straight into a 3-year cycle. It'll get there, I'm sure. But right now, let's hope it's a little bit a little bit slower. Yeah, what have you been up to with your hobby?
Well, obviously, we covered the Lord of the Ringsy bits I painted last time we spoke, but I have been chipping away on some bits for Chaos. I'm trying to remember which order I sent stuff to you, but I believe you'll have a picture of my Chaos Lord that I've been working on.
Yep.
Done a little bit of conversion work on him. Quite pleased with him, all in all. It also means that I'm pretty confident on my Chaos Warrior scheme for the actual warriors themselves and on the plate, so they'll all look pretty much like that. But there'll be sort of different furs and skins, and cloaks will be different colors, leathers will change, all that kind of thing. I'll try and make them as individual as I can. And then there's the Chaos Sorcerer. It's the Warhammer Plus one.
Yes.
Which much get hold of. Painted that up. Had Krista Burr running through my head the entire bloody time. Lady in Red.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the pictures now, so I'm looking down at, so I've got the reference. You'll be seeing it on the screen as a viewer, but it's not on my big screen right now as we go.
I did buy Friedel, painted her base, and started on her. But as I said, I've not done a huge amount. I've ordered some bits so I can finally sort my chariots out. I've managed to get hold of some resin rope. Like this
nice
Horser cable for scaled miniature tanks.
Right.
The steel. But it's made of resin, so I can bend it.
Oh, you have to send when we get off this call. Send me a link to that because I've got a use.
I will have to find it,
that.
but I will send it to you. Yeah, just so I can link the reins up because I've obviously not used the original crew, my chariots.
Yes, yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, I've got a good use for that. Nice. You might have just solved the problem for me.
Yes, pretty much it. That's what I've done.
Cool. I'm not going to go into detail. People know what I've been doing. I've been painting Cafe Army. And that is for people on the screen in lots of videos. And I don't actually have a time plan for when this is going out at the moment. It might be before the big army paint video for Cafe. If it is, look out for that. If this is afterwards, you'll have already seen it. But there's I split the videos down into sort of separate tutorials. But the biggest video is the kind of covering the battalion box. And the gatekeepers at the same time, because they feel like they would naturally be in it if it was the old style army boxes. So you've seen what I've been up to. Personal hobby wise, everything else stopped for that, just because it becomes a big thing. Normally I will get a resin character in the Arcane Journal for Empire and the High Elves. I got a little bit, a couple of regiment boxes. The High Elves I got the Hilarion Reavers, and for the Empire I got some state troops because I had a plan to do that, sort of covering more than one province in one video kind of thing. But most of the time I'm only getting what's new, and of course this time round I didn't expect it, but this time around it's everything was new and everything was plastic, and I got it all. So it was a kind of drop everything. And start working on it for content. And you've seen all the other content creators have got it as well. Loads of people got it. There's some beautiful stuff out there. Some people painted really quickly. Mountain Miniatures got loads, and he got it painted all in time for launch, and some really nice battle reports on there. And then Max over at Barefoot Miniatures, I love what they do on their channel. I don't know if you follow it or not, Dan, but he got all of his stuff painted, not only in time for launch, but also in time for that article that went live on, because I had a separate deadline for that, and you didn't have to send in anything. There's two different types of kind of content creator. You get people that are sent miniatures just to paint, and those are YouTubers, and you have slightly different NDAs. So I'm not required to do anything with the stuff they send me. It's up to me. But I'm not under contract to do anything with it. But there was a kind of, if you want to send us pictures, here's your deadline, and they gave me a date for that, which was significantly before the actual NDA date, a good 10 days, maybe nearly 2 weeks before that. And by that I mean Max painted that stuff very, very quick. So all the stuff I had, so the battalion box and each of the other plastics. So fair play to him for doing that and getting a battle report out on launch day. It's really cool. He does this really interesting thing where he puts the battle report and the Arcane General review out at the same time on launch day, so you can choose what you want to do when you want, and then if you've you read the Arcane Journal review, you can go and watch the battle report. So if you haven't already seen Barefoot Miniatures, go and check them out. They don't get anywhere near the kind of views that they deserve for what they're doing, to be honest with you. And it's hard on YouTube to kind of be found in search engines and things. I think they shoot themselves in the foot fighting with the algorithm by releasing 2 videos at the same time, by doing that really cool thing of having the Arcane Journal or the battle report with the new Arcane Journal at 10 o'clock live. It's great for the viewer, but it probably hurts them a little bit by having 2 videos put out at the same time. But they're definitely worth going and checking out, because usually on launch day, if you want to see how a new army plays, they've recently been putting out a battle report for that new army on launch day, which is no mean feat. So they're obviously working
it's
really
impressive.
hard behind the scenes. I just physically didn't have the time to do it, along with the commission work and family life, etc. But it's still been really cool to be able to put the army together. And like didn't think I was going to want to. No, not laziness, but I didn't think I was going to want this army as an army to play and keep playing. But as soon as I read the Arcane Journal, even before I got a hold of the miniatures, genuinely fell in love with it, because the lore is really cool. I was worried it wasn't going to feel Warhammer enough to me, and it definitely does. Looking forward to playing the army quite a lot, not just because they're quite good, but because they are really cool. But anyway, that's it. That's my hobby. Lots and lots of Cathay related stuff. That's all I've been doing. Right, Dan, you got anything else you want to mention before we close down for the day?
No, thanks for bearing with us. Probably not an awful lot to actually hear about in terms of our personal hobby after everything else we've waffled about, but thanks for bearing with us to the end if you've been interested in doing so. As always, thank you to everyone for the support, etc. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for watching. If you've made it all the way through to the end, go and check out all the links in the video description. I've tried, if I remember, to put some of the links to all those Arcane Journal reviews that we mentioned and the match play guide and stuff throughout the video. I may have forgotten, because it means watching the whole thing through after it's edited and physically stopping and adding the actual link in, which is a little bit of a pain in the bum to do. But thank you very much for watching. Check out all the sponsors and all the usual stuff. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.